So before you even get to an IG handle, a photo shoot, a domain, talk to us about the 3 ways for you to identify what is a viable business first.
Yeah, so I think when you're starting out business, first thing you'll realize is that the most and the difficult part of being a business is actually starting. How many times you see your friends always telling you, hey, I have this great business idea. And so once you break through that barrier, first you start by just, you create a product and you see who buys. And the way you go about that is maybe it's friends and family first, the people that are in your immediate circle. The next thing you do is get that group of strangers, people that have no ties to who you are, right? Seeing, okay, will they buy my product? Will they buy my service? And then after that is then putting a price tag. I always say when you start out, it's more important to get the review and testimonial than it is to start out by putting a price tag on a product. That review is more important, right? People buy based off if their product is validated. Think about when you shop, when you're on Amazon or your favorite store, what's the first thing you look at? It's the reviews. And then you go to the product description. So you have to think about, okay, when I'm starting my product with zero capital, what's the fastest way for me to get a sale? And that's through validation. So you validate through friends and family, you validate through strangers, and then you have that community now on that platform to then put your product online because you have that validation.
Awesome. So Desiree, we're going to jump over to you as our entertainment lawyer. So with that, there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to when you should actually start your LLC, especially you don't really got no coins in there, right? Like people are ready to start an LLC without it. So talk to us from the lens of a seasoned entertainment lawyer. What are some key indicators on when you should lock down your LLC, your S-4, or any general statement of business?
First, I want to give a disclaimer to say that I'm not retained by anyone in here, and so please don't take this as personal legal advice. It's very general, so just think of me as your homegirl who just happens to be an attorney. I think, one of the biggest misconceptions is people think that they have to start an LLC and that's the best business option. That might not necessarily work for your particular business. So I think that, in addition to seeking legal counsel, you should also seek a tax advisor. What type of business do you have? Maybe you don't have the money to start an LLC because starting an LLC is expensive. Maybe sole proprietorship is something that works for you initially. And then you can go to an S-corp and a corporation depending on how big you get it. So I think that first misconception is thinking that you need that LLC. And then once you determine what exactly fits your business, then that's the time to start. You don't want to just jump into something you're not making money because it is expensive and it has a huge tax liability no matter which way you go.
That's right, because we're here for Black wealth, right?
Yeah.
With that, so Shannon, throwing it over to you, you have an amazing client list. And so you were the VP of Civic Entertainment, but now you're the co-founder of Verb. So you've been able to work with clients, not only just Airbnb, but Crown Magazine, and you led the activation over at Cannes for Nielsen. So thinking about riches to niches, right? Talk to us about how creators can cut through the noise and create more visibility for their right market, not just everybody, because we're not for everybody, right? Okay.
I think that, my co-founder Yadira and I say all the time that the riches are in the niches because you shouldn't try to be all things to all people, and I think that CultureCon is a beautiful example of that. If you think about all of the conferences and events that there are in New York City at any given time, even Ad Week just a couple of weeks ago, and yet we're all here together sharing information, networking, and learning from each other. And what was great about what this team has created, it was by us, for us. Don't be afraid of that. And so figure out who you're for and whose you are for. And so I think that that's really the key to starting is getting very specific about who your target audience is and building from there. If you're trying to be all things to all people and market to everyone, it's not going to resonate with anyone. But the audience here today is a very clear example of how you can be very specific about who you are for and tailor your programming and marketing to that audience.
Amazing. So we're going to do a quick poll. Who's a full-time entrepreneur? Who's still working in corporate? Ooh, child. Okay. So we're going to throw it over to Abu and Shannon. Give us your thoughts on the debate on whether or not you should be a full-time entrepreneur or you should still work for, quote-unquote, the man.
Okay, so my view on this is I first started out as an entrepreneur before transitioning into corporate, and I came back out as an entrepreneur. I then went back into corporate, and now I'm a full-time entrepreneur. So I started my entrepreneurship journey at 17 years old, and at that point I was making like $30,000 a month in my business. But I thought, because the path that I was on, my mom was like, you got to go get a job, right? So I thought that was the only way to actually make money. Even as I was an entrepreneur, she didn't really quite understand what was happening. So when I was in my job, I always looked at myself as, the CEO. And so what I did was I would volunteer to take notes for the partners, for the executives, just to be in the room to hear the conversation, to hear the decision making that would take place and how they would get there, because that's the place that I wanted to be in. So I always say, when you're thinking about entrepreneurship and, working a 9 to 5, think about how can I utilize my skill, right? Because they're paying you, so you have that capital, but how can I get the most out of this? When they hire you, they're like, how can we get the most out of her or the most out of him? And they're gonna squeeze you, right? You're on a salary for 40 hours a week, but you're working 80, right? So now you have to look at yourself as a business. Well, how can I get the most out of this relationship? And so not until, I used to work out on Wall Street, and I remember I hated it so much. I was like, I need to do something else. So then I looked at, well, what skill set do I have? And I realized I was really good with ads. And so I remember posting on my Instagram stories, hey, I'm gonna start running ads for people starting at $2,000, $3,000. I woke up the next morning and I made $42,000. I walked into Wall Street and the woman's like, oh, boo, we got a meeting at 9:30. I was like, no, I don't got a meeting. This is my last day. But it's about, really utilizing where you are, really taking that resources of where you are and thinking ahead, right? Looking at where the white space is. It's the long game, right? I know a lot of your friends like, girl, you should leave. Like, you don't need to be at that job. And no, like really play chess, right? And you'll always be in the best position at the end of the day.
That's a great point. And I think the other thing is leveraging the resources of the company you're at doesn't mean taking supplies from the closet. How can you leverage the access to that executive leadership, to that network? Yadira and I worked at another agency together, and we would be over there kicking it with the folks in accounting. Why? Because we need to learn cash flow for our own business. You can think about all of those people as building your network, building your resources, building connections. We were able to start our business because we sent out goodbye notes and had 3 new clients within 3 days. That is because of the relationships and connections that we built while we were at our previous company. So everything doesn't always have to be a 9 to 5 or 5 to 9. You don't have to think about them so separate. You want to be respectful of the company that you're working for and working on company time, but that doesn't mean you can't take advantage of where you are and leveraging those resources and every single thing you can learn. You're not just there working for them, you're working for yourself. What skills are you building? What are you learning and retaining to take that into your business?
And to quickly add on to that, one of my friends gave me this piece of nugget a few years ago. Every day when she goes to work, she calls her job her investor. So I'm going to my investor today. But that changes your mindset and how you have that relationship with your job. And so when I adopted that mindset of, okay, I'm going to my investor today, it changed everything for me.
I want to jump in and add one thing. It was a great piece of advice a friend gave me. They said, work your regular job, but work to get fired so you can have that money coming in from unemployment and while you're building your business. So, that's a little tip too.
So that's the whole game plan. I hope you guys got that in your notes. So, listen, I'm not playing over here. Okay, so we're gonna throw it back to you, right? We're going to throw it back to you. We're going to talk a little bit more about collaborations, partnerships, protecting your ideas. So Desiree, so creative IP is a big conversation, especially among Black creatives. You got Cardi B, she's filing for trademarks over with you got Megan over here with Hot Girl Summer. So with that being said, we may be hot girls, but we're not necessarily Megan. So with that, Black creatives, especially emerging, they're very vulnerable to getting their ideas snatched up by companies. I don't know if y'all know, but that's a thing. So what are the things that we can be doing to protect ourselves from those things, or at least be aware?
I think one, understanding the difference between trademark and copyrights. So trademarks are essentially something that's a name or a service mark that's connected to a product or a service. A copyright is how you express an idea. So people always like to say someone stole my idea. I mean, a lot of people essentially have the same ideas. And so it's just how you express that, and that's what's copyrightable. Now, with the Cardi B trademark, she didn't get the trademark for Oprah because it wasn't connected to a product or a service. And Megan's Hot Girl Summer is pending, but she might get it. And it was new and it was novel. We didn't really hear that before Megan had said it. And so that's a difference too. And I think, a lot of creatives go out and they express these ideas or share these names or these new slogans, but they don't actually go and search the trademark register and see if it's available. They may think someone stole it and somebody else already may have a trademark. So I definitely think doing your due diligence ahead of time before you run around saying somebody stole my stuff.
That's a big fact. So hit your Google also, right? That's also somewhere to start. So Shannon, throwing it over to you, you're in the business of brand partnerships, especially with experiential. So you've had some time to build those relationships. Let's say you didn't have the relationships. Let's say you weren't a VP at some point in your life. What are the things that you would emphasize in the initial conversations when you're starting those types of relationships? And what would you put in your pitch deck? Because we need to know.
So I think that one key thing, there are a lot of people in the press that have talked about, the idea of networking up versus networking across. The peers that you're sitting next to and talking to today are the people that you need to be connecting with. It's not just about standing in line after a stage to get in front of someone. Like the client roster that we have, all of these other executives and C-level people and VPs were people that my co-founder and I worked with 10 and 15 years ago at other companies. It's about building those relationships now as you all come up together. And when people think about partnering with brands, a lot of times they want the sexy logo and you want to work with Netflix and Nike, and we have those clients. Those are great. But it's also really incredible to work with smaller brands where you have a lot more freedom and flexibility. And the CMO of Vita Coco was just talking about their deal with Rihanna on a podcast recently. And they talked about partnering with her maybe 2014, 2015 when she wasn't as big as she is now. And Rihanna got equity in Vita Coco. Now imagine if she had tried to go to a much larger brand, trying to elevate herself and get with someone bigger, she wouldn't necessarily had that same flexibility. And so there's something really valuable about not just looking at big logos or very recognizable brands, but also looking for brands that are coming up and partnering with them. When it comes to your deck, you have to be able to speak to why is it valuable? Sometimes when people ask us, how do I get sponsors? It's like, it's not benevolence. Like, people are not just doing it, out of the kindness of their heart. These clients are trying to sell a product or a service, and 9 times out of 10, they have someone to answer to as well. So who is the audience that you can reach that they cannot get to? How do you have something untapped that they have to work with you to get? We did a partnership with Crown Magazine and Netflix, and what was incredible about that partnership was that Crown was creating a lot of content for Netflix. Netflix marketing is incredible. They are one of the best brands that we work with when it comes to marketing, and shout out to all the black women at Netflix. But what's really great about them is that Crown, they recognize the value that Crown was bringing to the table with the audience that Crown has, and also the content that they were able to create. So when you're doing your decks, what are you able to create for this brand? How are you able to help them tell their story? What is the value that you're bringing to them? That has to be very explicit and very clear, because it's not just the person that you're giving the deck to. They likely have to sell that into someone else or get that budget approved, and there has to be tangible ROI. What are they getting out of that?
That's great. And so we're going to throw it over to Abu as we have a few minutes left. So I'm going to circle back over to your 40K over in that 1 month, but you said I'm going to head out. So with that, so if you go to Abu's social media, over on his About Me, he talked about a little bit of, I'm going to say like a 3-week pilot of you put $1,000 in ads and turned around over into 20K. So yeah, I did some receipts. So with that, take us back to when you actually hit 10K. What did you do with the money? Did you reinvest it? Did you go to brunch? Like what?
Yeah, so over a span of, I think it was 4 months, I spent $1,000 and made $100,000 back in ROI running Facebook and Instagram advertising, right? People tell me all the time it doesn't work. I'm like, well, how am I traveling the world? What money am I using? And so when I was running ads, whenever you get a return, right? So whenever I say, okay, I spent 1,000 or I spent 10,000 and I made 50,000, people assume that, well, I don't have $10,000. Neither did I, right? And so I started with $5 a day running campaigns. When that $5 brought me $100, I took all 100 because I was like, okay, here's something that works. Marketing is just a set of activities. Every business has a set of activities where it performs and it says, okay, I need to do 20 activities this month in order to reach my revenue goal. Whenever you trace back to, okay, when I didn't reach my revenue goal, well, how many activities did I perform? 9 out of 20. Okay, now you can't blame, you can't blame yourself because you didn't do the work in order to get that. So as I was making money, I remember I think I had spent like $200 and I made $10,000. And, it felt good, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, wow, I made this working like one day out of the week. And I was like, well, what does this reality look like for me going forward? And so, I didn't keep this skill to myself, and you talked about my Power Your Launch Virtual Marketing Accelerator for Founders. I train a lot of business founders on how to utilize ads. Last night I was talking with someone who had started my program back in January, and he's generated over $200,000. And yesterday he FaceTimed me from the new warehouse that he just opened up. So it's really about reinvesting your capital, right? My mentor used to always tell me, a hit song isn't created, it's marketed. And so we spend all this time building our product, and then we look up and we're like, wait, how am I going to get this out there? Right? We need to put the same amount of effort into marketing as we're doing building our product. And that's really important to understand as well.
That's a great answer. So we have about 5 minutes left. We're going to do quick fire round questions, and we'll try and squeeze in one question. So if you have a question, make sure it's not on Google. Thanks. Okay, so when should you make your first hire, Desiree?
When you have money to pay people, and really when you're tired of doing the work yourself. Shift that. Don't create dependencies on your team. That's one thing that I'm really firm about. So when you bring someone on, make sure that they can do the work. Make sure you don't have to go back over it and do it for them.
Immediately. I would say with hiring, the great thing about the economy that we live in now, you don't have to take on full-time hires. There was a time where you felt like, if I have someone on my team, I have to pay their salary, I have to offer benefits. You can hire contractors, you can hire people for 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour to just brainstorm with you. So don't be constrained to what you think it means to have a team. It doesn't have to be limited to someone working full-time on your business.
Things. First, hire for need, not because you want to look like you're a big company, right? And I see this mistake happening all the time. And the second aspect of working with a team is knowing in your business what are my marketing revenue generating activities. Don't focus on all the things that does not lead to straight revenue or cash for you. And I find this in a lot of entrepreneurs when you look at their list. About 90% of them has nothing to do with securing a bag. Right? They feel like, well, if I don't do these other things, I'm going to die. You're not going to die, right? Focus on the things that produce revenue and forget everything else.
Okay, so in terms of what you've seen with first years in business or even with your own personal business, what is the area that needs the most financial investment?
I'm going to say legal. I think a lot of people should spend the money on legal. It is sometimes a big cost, but it'll help you in the long run. You have to have the back end in order. If you don't have that back end in order, it doesn't matter how much money you spend on marketing, how much money you're bringing in, because the business will fail. Make sure that you have the right business formation. Make sure that you have these tax advisors and accountants and the contracts in place, whoever you're doing business with, NDAs, partnership agreements. You have to have all of that in line or it won't work.
She didn't pay me to say this, but I would say legal also. What has been really incredibly valuable for us is having a really phenomenal attorney, a Black woman, and she was able to negotiate a lot of the terms of our agreements. Again, we're working with really large companies, and oftentimes they will say, this is our standard MSA, this is our standard agreement, net 90. Net 90 means they're not paying you for 90 days. No one has time to, that is not protecting the bank. So that was really valuable for us to have an attorney that was able to negotiate those terms on our behalf, for sure.
Yeah, I have to agree with that because, man, I'm paying a lot of taxes and I do not like it. And I had to get a legal team and I'm forming my team. But the other thing is a personal investment in education, right? Your business only grows as much as your personal investments in yourself. And so making sure you have Whether it's every year, like, okay, I'm going to increase my personal education by 10%. Rather than 5,000 last year, this year I'm going to do 5,500. So always constantly reinvesting your money back into your education, into skill sets that you could learn to drive your business further.
Awesome. So basically, get a lawyer, y'all. You need to lock in on that. So last question of the fire round. You are a creative over at CultureCon. What are you going to do right now? So what could we be doing to secure the bag or protect the bag right now as it stands? We are in our seats right now. What are we going to do?
Get that, if you have an idea or a business name, make sure that you're not married to it unless you do the upfront research. So see if that business is registered in the city and state that you are in. See if that trademark is available. See if those social media handles are available. And if they are, go ahead and secure that early. You can easily buy the domain name. You can easily do that business registration. But you don't want to spend any of this money doing that unless you have that back-end research first.
I would say one critical step is being very clear about what you can offer. You know, there are a lot of people that you'll be in conversation with today, talking to people. You should be able to very clearly state what you do, what you're into, what you're about, what you can offer, and not starting with an ask. Like, oh, can you buy my thing? Can you look at my thing? Like, what can you offer? And that will be top of mind with people. And it may not be today that there's something we can hire you for, but there might be something tomorrow that a client says, oh, I'm looking for a muralist. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just met someone Saturday. So I would say being able to clearly communicate what do you offer, or what are you looking to do with the people that you meet here?
Yeah, I concur in finding and instead of having the mindset of, you know, what can I take, trying to find people today where you can add value to. Say, who can I help? Right? When you go in with that mentality, it'll always come back around because people have you top of mind. Right? I always tell people, if you're not top 10, you're forgotten. One way you be top of mind is by kindness, right? Always contributing to people, and it always comes back to you.
All right, so speaking of keeping top of mind, we only have a minute left. So if you do have questions, you can connect with all the panelists over outside. Where can we find you?
At Fofanah on Instagram. That's ABUFOFANAH.
I'm at Shannon on Instagram and Twitter.
And at Desiree_Talley, and my legal website is talleylawgroup.net.
Awesome. And if you'd like to find me, anyone in Minorities in Media Connect, anyone in Mid Connect? Over here. Okay, so if you'd like to join a network wide of 6,000 professionals of color in marketing, advertising, creative, go to mimconnect.com or at MIM Connect on social. And my name is Bianca Jeanty, and thank you guys for helping us protect the bag. Clap it up.